The monitors showed 11 of them now. An hour ago, there had been 3. I counted again because counting was the only thing keeping my hands steady. I have a habit, when something is wrong and I don't yet understand how wrong, of reducing it to a number. Numbers I can manage. Numbers go in a log. And a log is a thing you can hand to someone else. A thing that proves you were paying attention. So I went down the bank of screens with my eyes, and I counted. And the count came back 11. And then I counted a second time because the first count had felt like a lie my own eyes were telling me. Camera 4, the East Service Corridor under Section C, showed a man in a steward's vest dragging himself across the bare concrete on a leg that bent the wrong way at the knee. The high-visibility stripe on his back flaring white every time he hauled himself forward into the next pool of caged light. Camera 7 showed the loading dock, where 2 of them stood perfectly still, facing the cinder block wall, like they'd forgotten what they were doing, like 2 men waiting for a bus that was never going to come. Camera 9 was the worst. Camera 9 was the medical bay, and the medical bay had a window onto the inner concourse. And through that smeared pane of safety glass, I could see the crowd. 72,000 people. A sold-out match. The roar of them came up through the floor of the security control room as a low, constant pressure. A sound you stopped hearing the way you stop hearing your own pulse, until something made you notice it again, and then it was the loudest thing in the world. I could feel it in the soles of my boots through the rubber matting under the desk. A faint tremble in the concrete, the whole building humming with it. They were singing. Somebody had just had a chance on goal, and the entire north stand was on its feet. 70,000 voices folding into one rising wall of sound. And not one of them, not a single one of those 72,000 people, knew that 4 levels beneath their seats, down in the bones of the building they were standing on, something had started eating the staff. My name is Daniel Pruitt. I'm 51 years old, and for 19 of those years, I've run security operations for venues like this one. Stadiums, arenas, concert halls, the big enclosed places where you put a lot of people into one box and hope nothing goes wrong. I have watched a great many bad things happen on a great many small screens. Fights that came out of nothing, heart attacks in the upper tiers, a man who went over a railing during a cup final, and the 2 seconds of silence before the people below understood what had landed among them. The slow, ugly arithmetic of a crowd that decides it's angry. I have a stomach for it. You have to, or you don't last a season. I had never, in all those 19 years, watched anything remotely like what was happening on Screen 9. The medical lead, a woman named Esposito, walked into the frame. I knew her walk before I could make out her face on that grainy feed, the flat, unhurried stride of a person who has decided, long ago and for good, that panic is a luxury she cannot afford to keep. She crouched beside a man on a gurney, 2 fingers going to the side of his throat the way they had 100 times a season, checking a pulse. The man sat up and took her face in both his hands, almost gently, the way you might cradle the face of someone you loved. And then he did something to her throat that I'm not going to describe. And the timestamp in the corner of the screen read 1947. And outside, above us, through 4 levels of poured concrete and steel, the crowd sang louder. I just want to say thank you to everyone who keeps coming back to sit with these stories. And if this is your first time here, welcome, pull up a chair. If grounded survival horror is the kind of thing that keeps you up a little later than you meant to stay up, then subscribe, leave a comment, and stick around, because it genuinely helps this channel keep going. Now let me take you back to how it started, because the thing about that night is that none of it looked like an emergency until it was far too late to call it anything else. It started as a smell. I want to be honest about that, because everybody expects the beginning of one of these stories to be dramatic. And it wasn't. It was Tuesday. A gray, flat Tuesday in the dead middle of the season. The sky the color of wet cement since morning. A thin, cold rain coming and going all afternoon that turned the approach roads into long black mirrors and put a sheen on the turnstile handles that made the early arrivals shake their hands as they came through. The match was a midweek cup tie, a big one. The kind that fills the place to the last seat and then leaves a few thousand more standing outside the gates wishing they'd bought when they could. My shift had started at 4 in the afternoon, with nothing more remarkable on it than a broken turnstile at gate 12, and a vendor who'd parked his refrigerated truck in the wrong bay and was standing in the rain arguing the point with a steward half his age. Routine. The kind of routine you could set a clock by. The radio chatter in my ear was all the ordinary stuff, stewards checking in by their post numbers. The catering manager complaining that the beer lines on the West Concourse were running slow again. The duty doctor reporting 2 early arrivals already drunk before kickoff, and 1 twisted ankle on the steps of the family stand. The control room sits below the south stand, behind a plain gray door that most of the public never sees and wouldn't think twice about if they did. It's a long, low room with a curved bank of monitors running the length of one wall. 96 camera feeds stacked into a grid that I can read the way other men read a newspaper over breakfast. And a smaller cluster of screens off to the right dedicated to the systems that keep the building alive: ventilation, the fire panel, the power feeds, the public address controls. The light in there never changes. There are no windows. It's a cool blue-white glow off the monitors, the same at 4 in the afternoon as it is at 4 in the morning. No day and no night. Just the screens and the steady hum of the cooling fans behind the racks and the smell of old coffee and warm electronics that gets into your clothes after a 6-year shift pattern. I'd been running that room for 6 years. I knew the building the way you know a house you've lived in too long, the way the air moves through it, which corridors run cold in winter, where a draft will tug at a door, where the smell of the kitchens drifts to when the wind sits in the east. So when the smell came up through the ventilation grill set in the ceiling above my desk at around 5:15, I noticed it before anyone said a word. It wasn't a normal smell. The stadium has plenty of smells. And after 6 years, I could name nearly all of them: blind frying onions and old chip fat, spilled lager going stale and sweet on the concrete, the sharp chemical bite of the cleaning products the night crew dragged through in buckets, the diesel reek that came up from the delivery bays whenever a truck sat idling too long. I knew every one of those. This was none of them. It was Swedish and wrong, thick at the very back of the throat, like meat left out a day too long in a warm room. But underneath the sweetness, there was something else. Something sharper, almost medical. Almost like the inside of a hospital, like antiseptic laid over the top of something it was failing to cover. It caught in my sinuses, and it stayed there. And it had a weight to it, a kind of clinging quality that the ordinary stadium smells never had. I remember leaning back in my chair until it creaked, tilting my head up at the grill, and then turning to Marco, my second on shift that night. A steady kid of about 30 who'd been with me 2 seasons and had the rare and valuable quality of staying quiet until he had something worth saying. "You smell that?" I asked him. He lifted his head off the screen, sniffed once, twice, frowned. "Yeah, something's off. Kitchens? Check it." He got the catering manager on the radio. The kitchens were fine, all units running, nothing tripped, no fridge down, no spoilage reported anywhere on the line. Marco radioed maintenance next and asked them to take a look at the south stand air handlers, and got told they'd get to it, which in that building, on a match night, with 1,100 staff already stretched thin across 18 gates, meant that somebody would get to it sometime before the next century. I filed it, wrote it in the log in my small square hand, odd odor. South Control, 1715, maint advised. And I went back to the cameras, and the smells stayed there, sitting at the bottom of every breath I took, until I stopped consciously noticing it the way you stop noticing the roar of a crowd you've been listening to for an hour. The first call that mattered came in at 5:40. It was from a steward named Okafor, posted at the foot of the east stairwell near the medical bay. A big, calm man I'd worked alongside for 3 seasons and trusted further than most. He came on the radio sounding confused more than scared. And that is a distinction I have learned over 19 years to pay very close attention to. Confused people are telling you something they don't yet understand. And that's frequently more useful than scared people who have already decided what's happening and are reporting the decision to you rather than the facts. Okafor said there was a man down by the medical bay door. A staff member, he thought, in catering whites. The man had collapsed about 20 minutes earlier. Somebody had phoned it in. The duty doctor had brought him inside the bay. And now there was a second one. Another collapse, just outside the door. Same symptoms, Okafor said, whatever the symptoms even were. And then he said the thing that made me sit forward and set my coffee down on the desk without looking at it. The first one, he said, and I could hear him working it out as he spoke. He's not on the gurney anymore. He's up. But he's not Dan. He's not right. He's not talking. He's not saying anything at all. He's just sort of standing there in the doorway, swaying. I pulled a camera 9 up onto the main screen. Back then, before any of it, camera 9 just showed a quiet service corridor and the medical bay door, propped open with a yellow fire extinguisher because the latch had been broken for a month. The kind of small, persistent failure that doesn't matter at all until the one night it matters more than anything else in the world. I could see Okafor at the right edge of the frame, his bulk unmistakable even on the low-resolution feed, hanging back the way his training told him to. I could see the duty doctor, a young locum we'd brought in for the night because our regular man had gone home sick that afternoon, a thin kid in a fresh, high-vis tabard that still had the warehouse fold lines pressed into it. And I could see the figure in catering whites standing in the doorway with his back to the camera, swaying very slightly, the way a drunk man sways at last orders, except it was too smooth for that, too even, a slow side-to-side drift with no stumble in it at all, no shifting of weight, like the man wasn't moving himself so much as being moved by something underneath him. I keyed the radio. Okafor, control. Keep your distance from him. Let the doctor work. Don't crowd it, and don't put your hands on him. Copy that? I told the doctor, through Okafor, to get the man sitting back down and check his airway. The doctor went to him, moving carefully, one hand out in front of him, palm down, the practiced approach you use on someone who might be drunk or fitting or both. He put that hand flat on the man's shoulder, and his mouth moved, saying something I couldn't hear on the silent feed. The man in whites turned around. The camera was an old analog feed, low resolution, grainy in the flat corridor light. And I am grateful for that now, because what I could see was bad enough, and I do not think I could have lived with it any sharper. The man's face was wrong in a way I couldn't immediately put a name to and didn't want to look at long enough to name. His mouth was working, opening and closing, but no sound came out that the feed could catch. His eyes had a flat, wet shine to them. No focus in them at all, like the eyes of a fish laid out on ice at a market stall. And there was a dark stain down the front of his catering whites, A long, irregular spill that I had taken for sauce or red wine the first time my eyes had passed over the frame until he opened his mouth wider. And I understood, with a slow, cold drop in my stomach, that it had not come from a bottle. It had come from inside him. He took the doctor's outstretched hand. Not violently, not at first. He took it almost tenderly, the way you'd take a small child's hand to lead them safely across a road, and then he pulled it up to his mouth and bit down. And on the silent, grainy screen, the doctor's whole body convulsed, and his mouth stretched wide in a scream I couldn't hear. And Okafor came off the wall and moved in to pull them apart, because that was the job. That was simply what you did. And in the space of perhaps 4 seconds, the corridor on camera 9 turned from a still, quiet frame into a tangle of struggling arms and shoulders. 4 floors below, 70,000 people who were just then settling into their seats above. I hit the alarm protocol. Not the public alarm. You do not begin to evacuate a filling stadium on the strength of a confused steward and a single grainy camera. Not unless you want to crush in the concourses that kills more people in 10 minutes than any fire ever could. I hit the internal one. Medical emergency, East Medical Bay, all available first aid to respond. And I sent Marco out the control room door and down the corridor toward the corporate boxes to physically lay eyes on our head of medical, Dr. Esposito. Because she wasn't answering her handset, and I wanted to know where she was. And then I sat there, in the blue-white glow, with the crowd's roar pressing down warm and oblivious through the ceiling. And I felt the first cold finger of something I had not felt in 19 years on the job, which was the precise, specific sense that I was looking at a situation that did not have a procedure. Because here is the thing they teach you about venue security. And here is the thing I had built my entire career on. Every emergency has a category: fire, bomb threat, medical, crowd disorder, structural failure, severe weather. Each one of them has a plan, a flow chart, a laminated card and a binder, and a set of moves you make in a set order. And the whole discipline, the entire job, is recognizing which category you're in fast enough to start running the right flow chart before the situation gets out ahead of you. The categories are how you stay sane. The categories are how you keep your hands moving when the screens are full of horror. You look, you say medical, or you say disorder, and your hands already know the first 3 things to do before your heart has even caught up to what your eyes saw. What I was watching on screen 9 did not fit a category. A man had collapsed, gotten up, and bitten a doctor in a corridor. And now the doctor was on the floor and the man was still on his feet. And there was no flow chart for that. No laminated card. No first move that my hands already knew. And the absence of a flow chart was, in that exact moment, more frightening to me than the blood on the floor. Blood I had seen plenty of. Blood went in a box. Blood had a procedure. This had no box. And a thing with no box can grow in any direction it likes. Esposito reached the medical bay at 5:58. I tracked her on the cameras the whole way as she came down the east stairwell with 2 of her people behind her, taking the steps 2 at a time. And I watched her come into frame on camera 9 and stop dead 3 meters short of the doorway. I had radioed her everything I'd seen on the way down. And she had been professionally skeptical the entire descent. The way good doctors are asking sharp, short questions, not buying my words, looking for the ordinary explanation underneath them. And I watched the skepticism leave her body all at once, like water going out of a tipped glass, the instant she saw it with her own eyes. She threw an arm straight out across her 2 people and shoved them back hard. She got the corridor sealed at the heavy steel fire door 40 meters down. We have fire doors every 40 meters in the service levels, on magnetic holds. and she dropped that one by hand. And then she did a thing that doctors almost never do. A thing that told me how bad it was before she spoke a single word. She left the casualties where they were and climbed 4 flights of stairs to come up to the control room herself. She came through the inner door, breathing hard from the climb, and she stood in front of my wall of monitors with her arms crossed tight over her chest. And she looked at camera 9 for a long time, without speaking. She was about 45. Esposito gray coming into dark hair scraped back hard into a clip. The kind of deep, operational calm you only get from a whole career spent being the steadiest person in RARs and rooms full of frightened people. There were flecks of something dark dried on the cuff of her sleeve, and she hadn't noticed them yet, and I didn't tell her. On the screen below, the corridor now held more shapes than the 3 I had first counted. The locum doctor was up and moving. Okafor was up and moving. Both of them in that same wrong, even sway, drifting in among 2 others I hadn't watched arrive. "Daniel," she said, not taking her eyes off the screen. "How many people are in this building right now?" I told her. 72,000 ticketed. The place sold out to the very last seat, plus about 1,100 staff on shift, plus the players, the officials, the broadcast crews, the hospitality guests up in the boxes. Call it 74,000 souls inside one enclosed structure, with 18 public exits, every single one of them designed to let people out in an orderly 45 minutes after a final whistle. And not one of them designed to let people out in a hurry while 70,000 more were still trying to come in through the same gates. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing slow down deliberately. Hear her bringing herself back under control by an act of will, the way you'd haul a heavy door shut against a wind. Then she turned and looked at me directly for the first time since she'd come in. "I need you to understand what I think this is," she said. "And I need you to understand that I am not sure. And I need you to promise me that you will not put one single word of it onto the public address until we are sure. Because the wrong word into that microphone tonight kills more people than whatever is downstairs has touched so far. Do you understand me, Daniel?" Not one word. She told me. She used careful words, the deliberately careful words of a professional who knew that a single phrase spoken into the wrong system could become a stampede in a packed bowl in under a minute. She said that what she had seen in that man matched nothing in her training or in 20 years of her experience. She said the speed of it frightened her more than anything, that the man had collapsed and been up and aggressive again inside half an hour. That the transition was far too fast for almost anything she knew of. She said the worst part, the part she couldn't account for, was the indifference to injury. The way the doctor had kept moving and grabbing with damage that should by every rule have dropped him to the floor. She said it appeared to spread through bites, through fluid, through whatever had been in that working mouth. And then she said that the young locum she had hired for the night was now one of them. And so was Okafor. And so, by simple implication, was anyone the 2 of them had touched. "How many?" I asked. "In the corridor right now. 4, maybe 5. She nodded at the screen, her jaw set tight. "But Daniel..." She paused, and something shifted behind her eyes, the doctor's mind running on ahead of her own mouth. The first man, the one in catering whites, the one it started with. Where did he come from? I didn't know. And the not knowing was the loose thread that, when I took hold of it and pulled, unraveled the entire night around me. Because the man in catering whites had not been carried in from outside the building. He'd collapsed inside, in the staff areas, down in the service guts of the place, where staff had been working since 2 o'clock that afternoon. which meant that whatever this thing was, it had not arrived at the medical bay from the outside. It had started somewhere else, somewhere upstream, and it had been moving through the staff levels for hours before anyone thought, or was able, to call it in. The smell. The wrong, sweet medical smell that had come up through the grill above my desk at 5:15, that I'd written in the log as an odor and blamed on a faulty fridge. It hadn't been a fridge. I started pulling other cameras. This is the part I keep coming back to, in all the months since, the part I run over and over in the dark when I can't sleep, and the house is too quiet. If I'd started pulling those cameras at 5:15, when the smell first came, instead of at 6 o'clock, when the screaming started, would it have mattered? 45 minutes. I tell myself that it wouldn't have. I tell myself the smell was already the symptom and not the source. That by the time my sinuses caught it, the thing was already loose in the walls of the building. That those 45 minutes were lost before I ever drew the breath that should have warned me. I tell myself that. The way you tell yourself the things you need to be true in order to keep getting up in the morning. I don't fully believe it. I don't think I ever will. Camera 22, the staff canteen on the lower service level. Empty tables, overturned plastic chairs, one of them still rocking very slightly on its back legs. Trays of half-eaten food going cold under the strip lights. A drink spreading slowly across a tabletop and dripping off the edge. And something in the far corner on the floor that I let my eyes slide right past because I could not afford, just then, to look at it twice. Camera 31, the kit room. A door swinging slowly back and forth on its own hinge, nobody anywhere near it. The movement getting smaller and smaller. Camera 40, the player's tunnel. And that one was clean. That one was full of stewards and match officials and the ordinary chrome and adrenaline bustle of a tunnel 10 minutes before kickoff, because the players' areas are sealed off from the staff service levels by deliberate design. Hard security between the athletes and everyone else. And that single dry architectural fact was about to become the most important thing in the entire building. But it was camera 19 that stopped my hand dead on the controls. Camera 19 covered the main staff entrance on the north side, the door where the catering crews and the cleaners and the part-time matchday workers all badge in at the start of a shift. 1,100 of them on a night like this. The whole workforce funneling in through one controlled door across the back end of the afternoon. The feed was live, showing me a quiet entrance now, a single bored steward leaning against the wall by the badge reader, picking at his thumbnail. But the system holds a rolling buffer of everything. And I scrubbed the feedback back through the busy hour, back through the steady stream of arrivals, back to 5 o'clock, and I found it. At 5 o'clock, a full hour before any of this had reached the medical bay, camera 19 showed a delivery. A white refrigerated catering van backed up to the staff entrance ramp with its rear doors hanging open. 2 men in catering whites unloading crates onto a wheeled trolley. Food for the kitchens and the hospitality suites. Completely, utterly ordinary. The exact same scene that played out before every single match the place had ever hosted. Except that one of the 2 men, coming down the wet ramp with a crate held against his chest, stumbled. Just a stumble. He caught himself on the rail, took 2 more careful steps, and then he sat down hard on the wet concrete, the crate spilling its contents out across the ground beside him. And he did not get back up. The second man crouched over him. A steward drifted into the edge of the frame, and the timestamp in the corner read 17:04. The smell had come up through my grill at 17:15. 11 minutes after a man in catering whites sat down on the cold, wet concrete by the staff entrance and didn't get up again. I want to say that I understood the whole shape of it in that moment. I didn't. What I understood was narrow and cold and simple. That the start point was not the medical bay. The start point was the staff entrance. The start point was a delivery. And that in the single hour between 5 and 6 o'clock, while I was logging a broken turnstile and an odd odor, 1,100 staff had been moving through the building, doing their jobs in and out of the kitchens, the canteens, the bars, the storerooms, the cellars, the tight, low-ceilinged service corridors where people brush past one another shoulder to shoulder all night long, and I had no way on earth of knowing how many of them had touched the man who sat down on the concrete, or had touched someone who had. Esposito was reading the same screens over my shoulder. I heard her breathing change again, heard it go shallow and fast. "The kitchens," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Daniel, the crates, the food, everything in those crates goes up. To the kitchens first, then out to the bars, the hospitality, the concourse stands, the kiosks, to the 70,000 people upstairs." And that was the second thread. And it was far worse than the first. I have spent my whole career thinking about how people move. It is when you strip everything else away, the entire discipline, you stop thinking about a crowd as people, and you start thinking about it as a fluid, as a single substance that flows along whatever paths you give it, and pools where you let it, and surges where you didn't expect it to. You learn early that a crowd is not 70,000 individuals making 70,000 separate decisions. It is one body, a single living organism, and it has currents and pressures and a temperature and a mood. And if you understand those things deeply enough, you can keep it safe through almost anything. And if you don't, it will quite calmly kill itself trying to get through a door that is one body too narrow. I had kept that body safe through 6 years of matches in this building and a dozen years in others before it. I knew its currents the way I knew the backs of my own hands. And now there was something loose in the building that moved through that body the way I moved through the cameras, invisibly, through the spaces in between, faster than anyone could see or track or stop. The crowd above my head was singing. The match hadn't even kicked off yet. And somewhere down in the catering supply chain, in the bars and the hospitality suites and the concourse kiosks, the thing that had sat a man down on the concrete at 5 o'clock might already be in the food, in the drink, on the bare serving hands of the people pouring drinks and plating meals for 70,000 mouths. "We have to stop the bars," I said. "Shut the catering down, now." Esposito's hand came down on my forearm, hard enough that I felt her nails. "And tell them what?" she said. "Tell 70,000 people the food's poisoned? You'll empty this place in 4 minutes flat, and you'll stack bodies in the exits doing it. You know that far better than I do. You told me about your 18 doors yourself 2 minutes ago." She was right. I knew she was right. "And we don't even know that it's the food," she pressed on. "We don't know how far it travels beyond contact. We don't know the dose. We don't know the timing. We don't know anything for certain. We have 1 hour of footage and 4 bodies in a corridor. If we panic this crowd on a guess, the guess kills more people than the disease has even touched yet. Do the arithmetic, Daniel. You're good at arithmetic. Do it." She was right, and she was wrong. And the unbearable thing was that I could hold both of those at once, like one of those drawings that is a young woman and an old woman, and never settles into being only one. That was the trap I was in. The whole night turned on it, every hour of it. The safe move and the right move were not the same move, and I had no way to know which was which. And every minute I spent not knowing was a minute the thing in the walls kept moving through the body of the crowd. I made the first real decision at 1810. I couldn't evacuate. Esposito was right about that. And the arithmetic backed her all the way. A panicked evacuation of a full bowl, with the lower tiers already packed, was a mass casualty event entirely on its own, before you added so much as a single bite to it. But I could do the one thing I actually knew how to do. The one thing that was genuinely in a flow chart. Even if I was about to learn the hardest way possible that it was the wrong flow chart, I could contain. The service levels, the staff guts of the building, the kitchens and corridors and cellars and bays where this whole thing had started, were separated from the public concourses by access-controlled doors. The ones staff badged through all night, and the public never once laid eyes on. And those doors, exactly like the fire doors, could be driven into hard lockdown centrally, from the panel on my right hand. I could seal the entire service level off from the public areas with a single sequence of keystrokes. I could trap the thing where it had begun, down in the bones of the building, away from the 70,000 in the seats above. It was clean. It was a category. My hands already knew it. The problem was that there were still living staff down there. Real, breathing, frightened people. Some of them still calling in on the radio, some of them already gone silent. If I sealed the service levels, I sealed every one of them in with it. I sat with my hand hovering over the lockdown control, and I made myself think about it for a moment instead of simply doing it, because I knew that once it was done, it could not be undone in time to matter. I thought about Okafor, who had called in confused rather than scared, who had come off the wall to help the locum because that was the job, and the job was the kind of man he was, and who was now one of the swaying gray shapes on camera 9. I thought about the 1,100 staff who had badged in that afternoon to work a football match and earn a night's wage to take home, and I thought about the 70,000 above all of them, the body, the fluid, the great living thing I had spent my entire adult life learning how to keep safe. I keyed the radio one last time before I did it. All staff in the service levels, this is control. We have a containment situation developing. Anyone who can physically reach a public concourse stairwell, badge through and go now. You have 90 seconds. Do not stop for anyone. Do not go back for anything. Move. I watched the cameras while I counted it down in my head. I saw a few of them move, a cook in checked trousers sprinting flat out. 2 cleaners, a bar manager I knew well enough to drink with, all of them running for the stairwells, badging through, gone up into the safe, bright part of the building. I saw others who didn't move, because they couldn't anymore. The slow, swaying shapes that had stopped being staff somewhere in the last hour. And on the radio, I heard a kid, a steward, young by his voice and getting younger with every word as the fear climbed up into it, saying, "Control, I'm at the kitchen fire door. It won't control. It won't open. The door won't open. I can't get it to." And I understood all at once that some of the doors had already dropped into local lockdown on their own, from heat or from a fault or from the building's own electronic panic, and that I could not get him out of where he was without unlocking an entire section that would let 4 infected into the same corridor he was trapped in. I gave him 10 more seconds I did not have. I watched the count run down on the clock in the corner of the screen, 10, 9, 8, listening to him work at a door that wasn't going to open. He didn't reach a stairwell. And at 18:14, with the singing of the crowd pressing down warm and oblivious through the ceiling, I closed my hand on the panel and ran the lockdown sequence. And the service levels sealed, door by door, a cascade of red status lights blooming across the board in front of me from left to right. And somewhere down there in the dark, a steward whose name I never once learned was shut in with the thing that had eaten the night. If you have ever had to choose between 2 doors and known in your gut that both of them were wrong, I would genuinely like to hear it. And I would like to know whether you think I should have given that kid more than 10 seconds, or whether 10 was already more than I had any right to spend. I have never once managed to settle it for myself. For about 20 minutes, the containment held, and I let myself believe in it. The cameras inside the sealed service levels showed the infected milling, doing the thing I would come over the rest of that night to understand they always did when there was nothing warm and living nearby, to chase drifting, swaying, slowly gathering near the doors, as though they could feel the heat of the living on the far side of the steel, but couldn't reason their way through it to get at it. Camera 9, camera 22, camera 19, all of them showing the same slow, patient, dreadful gathering of something that had nowhere left in the world to go. And the public cameras, the entire other half of my wall of screens, showed 70,000 people who were completely and utterly unaware, on their feet, arms in the air, because the match had kicked off at 6:30 and the home side had buried one in the 8th minute, and the whole bowl had become a single roaring organism of pure, undiluted joy. 2 organisms in one building, one of them loud and bright and absolutely blind to the other. The other one quiet and patient, and shut down in the dark below, gathering at the doors. I should have known the containment was a lie, and I think some part of me did know. The way you know a thing you are not yet ready to turn and look directly at, because a building like that one is not a set of sealed boxes you can simply wall off from one another. It's a body. And a body has a circulatory system, and that system runs through every wall, above every ceiling, below every floor, threading the entire structure together whether you want it to or not. The ventilation. The very same ventilation that had carried the smell up to me at 5:15 and that I'd written off as nothing in the log. It was Marco who saw it first. He'd been quiet a long while at the systems cluster down the right-hand end of the room, head down, working at something, his face lit blue from below by the screen. And when he finally spoke, his voice came out flat and wrong in a way that made me turn toward him before I'd even processed the words. Dan. He didn't look up from the screen. The air handlers. You need to come and look at the air handlers. Now. The ventilation in that building was zoned, the way it is in any big modern venue. Each section of the structure had its own air handling unit, pulling fresh air in from outside, circulating it through the spaces, exhausting the stale. The service levels had their own zone. The public concourses had theirs. And the 2 zones were supposed to be entirely independent loops, no crossover anywhere, the stale air of one never once touching the air of the other. But supposed to be is a phrase that has ended a great many lives, and I've hated the sound of it ever since that night, because 3 years before, during a refurbishment I hadn't been part of, hadn't even known the details of the contractors had tied the service level exhaust into the main return duct, to save themselves the cost and the roof penetration of running a separate exhaust stack all the way up to atmosphere. It was right there in the building plans. It was a known, documented, signed-off thing that had passed every inspection. And what it meant, in the cold, flat reading of the schematic Marco had pulled up onto his screen and was tracing with one finger, was that the air being drawn out of the sealed service levels, the air around the infected, the air thick with whatever it was that made that sweet medical smell, was not going up and out to the roof at all. It was being pulled into the main return duct, mixed, run through the filters, and pushed straight back out across the public concourses, where 70,000 people were breathing as deep and as hard as people only ever breathe when they're singing. I had sealed the doors. I had not sealed the air. There was no way to seal the air because the air was one body, in exactly the same way the crowd was one body. and I had been so fixed on the things that walk that I had forgotten entirely about the thing that flows. "Is it airborne?" I asked Esposito. My own voice came out strange and thin to me, like a voice on a bad phone line. "Does it travel in the air? Does it move?" She was already over at the system screen beside Marco, reading the duct schematic, one finger laid on the line where the service exhaust tied into the public return, following it. And she didn't answer for a long, long time. The not answering was the answer, and I felt it land in my chest like a fist of cold water. "I don't know for certain," she finally said, and her voice was very controlled. "The bites are the fast route, that's what spread it through the service level in minutes. But the smell, Daniel. The man on the concrete at 5 o'clock who sat down before anyone had even touched him. The staff who collapsed in the canteen on their own. The collapse before any bite at all." She straightened up slowly from the screen. "I don't think the bite is the only way in. I think the bite is just the fast way in. I think the slow way is the air. And—" she glanced at the timestamp in the corner of the screen, and did the arithmetic the same way I did it, by pure reflex. "I think the slow way has had over 2 hours. Over 2 hours of service-level air, pulled into the main return, filtered and pushed back out across the concourses, into the lungs of the crowd." I have tried many times to describe what that piece of knowledge felt like landing. And I find I still can't get all the way to it. The closest I can come is this. It was like the floor of the control room dropping silently away beneath my chair while I stayed exactly where I was, suspended over nothing, watching 70,000 people on the wall of screens stand and sing and grab each other by the shoulders over a goal, and understanding, all at once and entire, that the air filling their lungs as they roared had come up through the lungs of the building from the place where the dead were standing and gathering at the doors in the dark. The containment I had been so quietly, privately proud of, the clean, categorical move that my whole career had trained me to reach for, had done nothing. Worse than nothing. By sealing the service levels, I had concentrated the infected into one confined space, raised the load in the air being drawn out of that exact space, and pumped it directly into the public's lungs at a higher dose than if I had simply left the doors open and let the whole thing disperse and thin into a much larger volume. I had done that. Me, my own hand on the panel at 1814, and I had felt good about it for 20 whole minutes. This is the part where the story stops being about a building and starts being about what was inside it and what we were going to have to try to do about it. Because up to that point, I had been a man managing an incident, running flow charts, making moves, keeping a number in a log. And after that point, I was a man who understood that he had already lost and simply hadn't seen all of the bodies yet. The first one upstairs went down at 1851. I very nearly missed it. I was watching everything at once by then, all 96 feeds cycling across the wall, my eyes moving in the trained sweep I can hold for an entire match without blinking. And on camera 58, the upper concourse of the West Stand. A man in a home replica shirt simply folded up at the knees in the middle of a packed walkway and went down, the exact way a puppet goes down when every string is cut at the same instant. The crowd around him reacted precisely the way crowds do, a beat of confusion, a small circle opening up around him, someone crouching to help, someone else standing and waving a flat hand back over their head for a steward. An ordinary medical event. They happen at every match. The heat, the drink, a bad heart picking the worst possible moment. The stewards have a clean, fast system for it. They'd have him on a stretcher and out to the medical bay except the medical bay was sealed 4 levels down, and it was full of the dead. And the man on camera 58, after about 90 seconds flat on the ground, with a stranger crouched over him, chafing his hand and patting his cheek, sat up and reached out and took that stranger by the arm. I keyed the public address override before I had consciously decided to do it. 6 years of restraint, all of Esposito's careful, deliberate words about not panicking the crowd. And all of it went out of me in one single motion, the instant I watched it begin to happen above the surface, up in the seats, among the living, where there was no door to close and no zone left to seal. But I stopped, with my thumb pressed hard on the button and the channel open and dead air going out to 70,000 people, because what in God's name was I going to say? There is no public address script for the air you are breathing right now is turning the person standing next to you into something that will bite you. There is no sentence that ends a problem of that particular shape. There is only the sentence that starts the stampede. And a stampede in a full bowl with 18 doors and 70,000 people in it would peel bodies against the barriers and stack them in the vomitories until the dead from the crush alone outnumbered anything the disease could manage in an hour. Esposito's hand came down over the top of mine on the button and physically lifted my thumb off it. "Not yet," she said, very low and very steady, right by my ear. "If you start a crush right now, you kill thousands in the exits in the next 10 minutes. Guaranteed. Certain. Against a threat that we can see in exactly one person. One, Daniel. You do not trade thousands of certain dead for one." "It's not one," I said. "It's everyone who breathed that air for 2 hours. We just can't see the rest of them yet. They're all still standing because the clock hasn't run out on them. That's all. The clock." And there it was. The thing that made the entire rest of the night unbearable, in a way I'm not sure I can make you feel. The infected were not a number I could count on a screen and write down in a log. The infected were potentially every last one of them. All 70,000. Every single person who had drawn a breath on those concourses since 5 o'clock. And the only thing I did not know was the incubation, how long between breathing it in and folding up at the knees. The man on 58 had gone down at 18:51. If the air had first reached the concourses around 5, then that was nearly 2 full hours for him. But maybe he had taken a much bigger dose. Maybe he had been standing right under a return vent the entire time, breathing it straight. Maybe the rest of them had hours left in them. Maybe they had minutes. I didn't know. And the not knowing was a particular and specific kind of madness, because it meant that every single person on every single screen in front of me was a clock that I could not read, ticking down toward a number I could not see. Here's the part of the night that I have never told anyone the way I'm about to tell it to you now. At 19:02, the radio crackled with a channel that should not have existed. The stadium ran on a closed digital radio net, every handset assigned to a specific named person, every channel logged and accounted for. Security and medical and catering and stewards and maintenance each on their own talk group. The whole arrangement printed on a chart pinned to the wall above my desk that I knew so well I could have drawn it from memory. There were no spare channels. None. And at 19:02, a transmission came through clear and strong and steady on a frequency that was not on the chart. A flat, level voice. No panic in it anywhere, no warmth in it either. Not a steward, not anyone I'd ever heard speak in 6 years. And it said, "Control room, this is coordination. Confirm your containment status. We are aware of the situation in your facility. Hold your current posture. Do not initiate public evacuation. Assistance is inbound. Repeat. Do not evacuate. Hold." I stared at the handset in my hand as if it had grown warm. Esposito stared at me. Marco had gone completely still at the systems cluster, one hand frozen above the keyboard. "Who is this?" I said into the radio. "Identify yourself. This is a closed net." "Who's transmitting?" "Coordination. Hold your posture, control. You are doing the right thing by containing. Public evacuation will compromise the perimeter. Assistance is inbound, approximately 20 minutes out. Confirm that you will hold." There is a particular cold that goes straight through a man when a stranger on an impossible channel tells him that he is doing the right thing by containing. At the very moment he has just finally understood that containing was the wrong thing, that the seal is killing the precise people, the voice is now telling him to keep behind it. Because it meant the voice wanted the people inside. The voice was not surprised, was not horrified, was not asking a single question. The voice had a procedure ready and waiting for a sealed stadium full of 70,000 people turning into something. The voice had a word for the edge of the building, perimeter, and a plan that depended on that perimeter holding, on the doors staying shut, on the body staying in the box. "What is this?" I said, and it was no longer a question. "What's inbound? Who are you? Say it." A pause on the channel, just long enough to be deliberate. Then, "Control. Your facility received a contaminated delivery at approximately 1700 hours. We are aware of it. Containment is the protocol. The protocol exists for events exactly like this one. You will hold the perimeter, and assistance will arrive to manage the situation. Any attempt to open the perimeter, any evacuation, any breach of the structure's exits will be treated as a hostile breach. Do you understand me? Control." A contaminated delivery. They knew about the van, the white refrigerated catering van that had backed up to the staff entrance ramp at 5 o'clock and unloaded a man in whites who sat down on the concrete and didn't get up. They knew about it, and the whole shape of the thing arrived in me all at once, the way the very worst understandings always do. Every piece of it landing in the same instant they knew about it, because it had not been an accident. A contaminated delivery is a thing that happens to you. A misfortune, a broken cold chain, a bad crate, rotten luck. But a delivery that someone is aware of in advance, that has a protocol already written for it, that arrives complete with a coordinated response already holding station 20 minutes out from the gates, that is not a thing that happens to you. That is a thing that is done to you. The stadium had not been struck by a disaster. It had been chosen for one. If you have been waiting for the moment the floor tilts underneath a story, that radio call was mine. Up until 1902, I thought I was managing an accident. A bad delivery, a freak disease, terrible rotten luck on a wet Tuesday. After 1902, I understood that I was standing inside something that had been planned carefully by people with a vocabulary for it, and that the people on the other end of that impossible channel did not want me to save the 70,000. They wanted me to keep them in the box until their assistance arrived to do whatever it is you do to a sealed building full of the infected and the about to be infected. The phrase "treated as a hostile breach" told me exactly what kind of assistance that was. You do not treat an open door as a hostile breach unless your entire plan is to make absolutely certain that nothing inside the building ever comes out of it alive. I didn't answer coordination. I reached over and muted the channel with the flat of my hand. And I turned around to face Esposito and Marco. And I said the thing out loud so that it would become real in the room, and not just a horror trapped inside my own skull. They knew. This was put here on purpose in that van. And whoever's inbound in 20 minutes isn't coming to get these people out. They're coming to make sure these people never get out. Esposito's face did something I had not seen it do all night. The deep operational calm cracked straight down the middle, just for a second, And what was underneath it was not fear. It was a clean, white, absolute fury. She was a doctor. Her entire adult life was built on one single principle, that you do everything you can for everyone. You can, every time. No exceptions. No acceptable losses. And someone on a radio had just informed her, in a flat administrative voice, that 70,000 human beings were an acceptable loss inside a line drawn on a map. "How long to evacuate this place properly?" she asked. Her voice had gone very quiet and very precise. "If you started right now, did it the way you actually know how, kept the currents moving, no panic, no crush?" 45 minutes for a normal full house," I said. "Tonight?" I looked at the wall of screens that the man on 58 now lost somewhere in a confused, milling knot of frightened people. At the dead gathering on the sealed service feeds, at 70,000 people who still had absolutely no idea what was breathing through them. Tonight there's no doing it right. The second they understand what's actually happening to them, it stops being a crowd and becomes a stampede, and there's no recovering it. And if I open the perimeter to get them out, the people inbound treat it as a breach. So these are my choices. I hold the doors, and everyone in this building turns or gets put down by whoever's coming. Or I open the doors, start a crush that kills thousands at the exits, and the rest of them run out into a city of millions carrying whatever's already in their lungs. That was the box. Those were its four walls, and I could feel every single one of them pressing in. Hold, and they die in here. Open, and they die in the doors, or worse, far worse. The ones who make it out carry the thing straight into the streets, the buses, the late trains, the homes, and the schools of a city of millions. The containment that had so spectacularly failed to protect the people inside the building might be the only thing on earth still standing between this and everyone outside it. The perimeter was a death trap for the 70,000 and a wall for the millions. And it was the exact same perimeter, and I was the man with his hand resting on it. I would like you to sit in that for a second, because I had to. With the body of the crowd singing above my head and a flat voice on a dead channel telling me to hold the line, which one do you open? The doors and trust 70,000 panicking people loose in a sleeping city? Or nothing at all, and let strangers with a protocol and a perimeter decide who lives and who doesn't? Tell me, honestly, because I've run it 10,000 times in the dark since, and I have never once found a clean answer at the bottom of it. Marco found the third way. He was 30 years old, and he had not yet spent a whole career learning that every emergency has a category, and that the category is how you stay sane. And so he was the one person in that room able to think outside of all the categories at the same time. "The air," he said. He had come away from the systems cluster, and he was standing between me and the duct schematic. And he was talking fast now, the words tripping over the idea behind them. "Dan, it's the air that's doing the killing up there. The bites are slow to get through 70,000 people. There's only the one infected on the whole concourse that we can even see. It's the air. The return duct. 2 hours of it cycling. So what if we just stop the air?" I looked back at the system screen, at the ventilation panel, at the system that had so quietly betrayed me. "If we shut the air handlers down," Marco said, "we stop pulling service-level air into the public return. We stop adding to the dose right now, this second. It doesn't undo the 2 hours that already happened. Nothing on earth undoes that. But it stops it getting worse from this minute on. And," he stabbed a finger at the schematic, "at the public side units. And if we don't just stop them, if we reverse the public handlers, run them on full exhaust with the building's exterior doors held closed, Then we pull the contaminated air up and out of the concourses and dump it straight to atmosphere instead of recirculating it back through everybody's lungs. We can't get the people out without a crush, but we can maybe get the poison out from around them. Esposito was already nodding, the doctor in her seizing on it, turning it over, testing it for soundness. Dilution, she said. You can't cure the ones who've already crossed the line. There's nothing for them, but you can lower the exposure for everyone who hasn't crossed it yet. The ones who only took a small dose, if you stop adding to it and start actively clearing it out of the air, the load in their systems might never reach the threshold. Some of them might never tip over at all. You'd be saving the ones standing right on the edge of it. It was not a rescue. I need to be precise about that, because for a long time afterward, I let myself remember it as something more heroic and more whole than it was. It did not get one single living person out of that building. It was a man in a control room deciding that if he could not open the box, then he could at least change the air inside it, and pray that changing the air was enough for the people who hadn't yet breathed too deep. It was the only move left on the entire board that wasn't a massacre. So that was the move I made. But the ventilation controls were not in the control room. That was the thing that turned a decision into a sacrifice, the fact the building had been quietly waiting all night to spring. The master air handling controls, the manual overrides that could reverse the public handlers and isolate the service level return, were in the central plant room. And the central plant room was down in the service levels, behind the doors I had sealed with my own hand at 1814. In the dark, with the dead gathered at every door. We had the schematic. We had the badge access to open one door at a time from the panel, remotely, just long enough for a person to pass through it and then slam it shut again behind them. We had a route I could trace it on the cameras, door by door. The plant room 400 meters into the sealed zone, past camera 9, past the medical bay, past the gathering. And we had, by my count on the feeds, somewhere between 20 and 30 infected loose in those corridors, drifting, patient, gathered at the doors, waiting for warmth. Someone had to go down into the body of the building, through the dark, past the dead, all the way to the room where the lungs were controlled and changed the air. And I was the man who knew the building best, who had sealed the doors, who had made the wrong call at 1814, and felt good about it for 20 minutes. The math of it was simple and clean, and it was mine to carry. I keyed the panel to start the unlock sequence, and Esposito put her hand down flat on the desk over the controls and said one word. No. I looked up at her. You run the doors, she said. You are the only person alive in this building who can read 30 drifting infected across a dozen cameras and unlock the right door a half second ahead of someone running through it. Nobody else can do that, Daniel. I'd be dead in the first corridor, and you know it as well as I do. And I am the only one who understands those plant settings well enough to reverse the exhaust without crashing the whole system, or tripping the fire suppression and dropping the entire building into the dark. It has to be you up here, on the cameras, and me down there, on the plant. There is no version of this where it's you who goes. You die in that corridor, and 70,000 people die with you. Because there's nobody left up here who can run the doors. I die in that corridor, and the worst case is exactly the same as if we had never even tried. That's the whole equation. You know it's right. She was right. That was the unforgivable part of it, that she was so completely, so operationally right, and that I could not find a single crack in it. The job at the top genuinely could not be handed off to anyone. Reading 30 drifting shapes across a dozen feeds and threading a person through the doors a half second ahead of them was a thing I could do only because I had lived inside those cameras for 6 years. and a thing that would get anybody else in the building killed inside 60 seconds. And the job down below genuinely needed her hands and no one else's. Hands that knew the difference between an exhaust setting that cleared the air and one that pulled the suppression and killed the power and finished us all. We had built our two entire careers, hers and mine, into precisely the two skills this one impossible task demanded. One skill each with no overlap. And there was no swapping them, no sharing them, no third way to slot the pieces together. So I gave her my radio earpiece and pressed it into her ear with my own hand. And Marco found a fire axe in the wall case and put the haft of it into her grip. And I walked her to the inner door of the control room. I tried to find something useful to say and couldn't. And what came out of me instead was the only completely true thing I had. "I'll keep you ahead of them," I said. "Every door. Whatever else happens down there, I will keep you ahead of them. I promise you that." She looked at me for a second, and the fury and the calm had folded themselves back together into something I can only call resolve. "Just change the air, Daniel," she said. "Whatever happens to me down there. Get me to that plant room and let me change the air, and then you do your actual job up here. That's the deal. That's the whole deal." And then she turned and stepped through the door out into the cold concrete stairwell, and I sealed it behind her, and I went back to the wall of cameras. And for the next 11 minutes, I became nothing in the entire world but a man and a building and a panel of doors. I want to tell this part exactly as it happened, slowly, because Esposito earned every single second of it being told right. I ran her the long way around, away from the medical bay gathering, down the East Service spine where the cameras showed only 2 infected, both of them drifting near the canteen at the far end. The corridors down there were narrow and low. Breeze block walls painted the institutional gray-green of the back of every stadium in the world. Lit by caged bulkhead lights set every few meters that left long pools of solid shadow between them. She had to pass through bands of light and dark, light and dark. And on the grainy feed she seemed to vanish entirely in each stretch of shadow, and then resolve again in the next pool of light. I unlocked the first door the instant she reached it and slammed it shut the moment she was through, watching the status light flick green, then hard red. And I talked her along the whole way in a low, flat, deliberate voice I kept level on purpose, telling her what was around each corner before she ever reached it. 2 ahead of you, by the canteen, 60 meters out, both facing away from you. Take the right at the junction, the maintenance passage. It's clear all the way to the end. And she went right, and it was clear. And for 90 seconds I let myself believe that we were going to thread it clean. Then camera 33, the maintenance passage, showed me the thing the schematic had not. A door I had marked on the route as a clean-through route was chained. Physically chained. A length of steel chain run through the push bars and a heavy contractor's brass padlock holding it. The kind of thing that goes onto a door during a job and is supposed to come back off the day the job is finished. Another one of those small, old patient failures. A door that somebody had secured during some long-finished bit of refurbishment and never once come back to free again. And it wasn't in my system because it wasn't an electronic lock. It was just a chain and a padlock that the schematic in front of me had no idea even existed. Esposito hit it at a run, her shoulder going into the bars, and it didn't give. The chain snapping taut with a flat rattle, and on camera 31, drawn by the noise, drawn by the sound of something living and moving. The 2 infected from the canteen turned at the same moment and started toward the mouth of the passage. There was one other way to the plant room from where she stood. It went past the medical bay, past camera 9, past the gathering. I told her. I didn't soften it, didn't round the edges off it, didn't pretend it was anything other than what it was. Because she had earned the truth, and because a comfortable lie would only have gotten her killed a few meters further along, I told her exactly what was there. The count, the positions, the timing of the two now closing in behind her down the passage. And she said, breathing hard, her voice tight in my ear, "How many at the bay?" 11 that I can see along the corridor, I said. Maybe more inside the bay itself. Off camera, I can't see into the room. There's a clear line down the left-hand wall if they don't all turn at once, about 3 meters of open floor along that wall before the plant door. I can open the plant the instant you reach it, not before. But Esposito, listen to me once you're in that corridor. I cannot unlock anything fast enough to bring you back out the way you came. The plant room is a dead end. One door, in and out. If it goes wrong in there, you're in that corridor with all of them, and no door behind you. The channel went quiet. On camera 33, I watched her look back over her shoulder the way she had come, at the two infected now coming into the far end of the maintenance passage, closing the distance with that awful, unhurried drift. Behind her, a chain door that would not open. Ahead of her, the bay, the gathering, and one single chance at the plant room. No good doors anywhere. The exact same trap I'd been standing in all night long, handed down to her in miniature in a gray-green corridor 400 meters into the dark. "Open the plant the second I'm at it," she said. "Not one moment before. If you open it early, they'll drift toward the change in the air or the sound of it, and I'll lose the wall. Wait for me. I'll run the left side." A pause, and then her voice dropped and went very level. The voice she must have used 100 times in her life, telling families the worst news they would ever hear. "And Daniel, if I don't make it to that door, if I go down in that corridor before I reach the plant, you do not open this zone to come and get me. You do not let Marco come and get me. You change the air some other way, or you don't change it at all, but you do not break this seal for me. Promise me that the same way you just promised the other thing. Say it out loud." I promised her. It was the second promise of the night, and it was the one I meant the least and kept the hardest. She went into the corridor. I have watched the footage of those 40 seconds more times than is good for any man. I watched them live, hunched over the panel with my hand poised over the plant room unlock and my eyes splitting back and forth between her position and the door. And I have watched them many times since, alone in the dark. And they are always the same 40 seconds, and they always end the same way. And I keep watching them, as though one of these times the ending might somehow come out different. She ran the left wall. She was faster than I would have guessed from her flat, unhurried walk, low and tight against the breeze block, the axe held close against her body so it wouldn't catch on anything. The gathering didn't all turn at once. Most of them were facing into the bay, drawn by something in there that I couldn't see. And she was 3 full strides down the wall before the first of them swung slowly around toward her. I was counting her strides under my breath, eyes flicking from her to the plant door and back. And when she was 4 meters out, I keyed the unlock, and the status light on my panel went green. And I said, "Plant's open. It's open. Go, go, go." And she went. And she was 2 meters from the open door when one of them came off the bay window, faster than all the rest, faster than I'd seen any of them move off all night. The young locum doctor from the very start of the night. And it caught her trailing arm. She did not stop. That is the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I will carry to the end of my own life. She did not stop, did not try to pull free, did not waste so much as the half second it would have taken to fight it. She let it have the arm, and she used the pull, twisting her whole body around with it and through the open plant door with the thing still fastened onto her. And on camera 9, I saw her swing the axe back behind her into the doorway as she went. A single hard chop. And then she was inside, and the door swung, and I slammed the lock, and the status light went hard red, and the camera inside the plant room, because there was a camera inside the plant room, showed me Dr. Esposito down on the steel floor of the central plant, alone, the dead locked out behind her, both hands pressed flat to her own forearm, where the white of a bandage she had somehow already torn loose and wrapped around it was going dark. She had been bitten. She knew exactly, precisely, clinically what that meant. Better than anyone else alive in the building, because she had watched the clock run out on the locum and on Okafor with a doctor's own eye. And she got up off the floor of the plant room, and she walked to the air handling control cabinet. And she keyed the radio and said, in a voice that was already a little slow, a little soft at the edges, "I'm at the plant. Talk me through nothing, Daniel. I know these settings cold. Just keep the channel open, so I'm not alone in here." So I kept the channel open. And over the next 4 minutes, Dr. Esposito bitten, with perhaps 20 minutes left before the clock ran all the way out. Locked alone in the lungs of a building above which 70,000 people stood and sang reconfigured the air. She isolated the service level return so that it stopped feeding the public side. I watched the status flags change on my own screen as she did it, one by one, in the right order. She reversed the public concourse handlers to full exhaust, doors held closed, pulling the contaminated air up and out to the roof instead of breathing it back through 70,000 pairs of lungs. She talked me through each step as she did it, not because I needed to hear it, but because she did. Because the sound of another living human voice in her ear was the only thing left in the whole world that she could still hold on to. And when it was finished, when the system screen in front of me showed the public side handlers ramping all the way up to full exhaust and the service return going to isolated, she said, "It's done. The air up there's clearing. It'll take time, it's a big volume of air to move. But it's clearing now, not getting worse." I looked at cameras, 58, 59, 60, the concourses, and of course I could see nothing change at all, because air doesn't change on a camera. But the system screen told me it was moving, told me the load was dropping, told me that the slow poison in the lungs of the crowd was being dragged up and out into the cold night sky over the city. The man on 58 was still down, still surrounded by a frightened knot of people who didn't understand what they were even looking at. But maybe the woman standing next to him, who had breathed the very same air for the very same 2 hours, would not go down now. Maybe the air clearing was the whole difference between her tipping over and not. I would never know which ones. That was the cost and the exact shape of the move Marco had found. You save people whose names you will never learn, from a death they never even knew was coming for them. "Esposito," I said, "come back to the door. I'll find you a route. We'll figure something out. I'll thin them out somehow. "No, you won't," she said gently, the way she had probably told 100 families gentle, terrible things over the years. "You'll keep your promise. The zone stays sealed. I'm in the safest room in this whole building right now. Daniel, there's nothing in here with me but the machines. And the machines don't bite. I'm going to sit down against this wall, and I'm going to keep this channel open for as long as I'm able to. And you are going to do your actual job, which is the 70,000 people upstairs who are about to find out that they have to leave their match. The air's clearing. That buys you time. Use it. Empty this place out the right way, the slow way, the way you know how to do it, before whoever's inbound gets to the gates. A pause, and her voice was slower now. The words coming with more effort, more space opening up between them. That's the whole point of what I just did. I didn't clear the air to save the air. I cleared it to buy you the time to do it right. So do it right. That's the only way. This wasn't for nothing. And that one sentence reframed the entire night for me, in the worst and the most clarifying way possible at the same time. I'd thought all along the fight was the disease. It wasn't. The disease, I could not beat it, was already in the air. Already in 2 hours of stolen breath, already long past saving for the ones it had taken. The fight was time. The voice on the radio, coordination, had said assistance was 20 minutes out, and that assistance was coming to seal the box forever and make absolutely certain the perimeter held. Esposito clearing the air did not, by itself, save a single soul. What it did was lower the rate of collapse on the concourses just enough that I might be able to run a controlled, current-managing, no-crush evacuation. The exact kind I actually knew in my own hands how to run. Before the crowd hit the panic threshold, and before the inbound assistance arrived, to make sure that nothing inside that building ever walked back out of it. She had bought me a window. 15 minutes, maybe. And she had paid for that window with her arm, which is to say with her life. And now she was spending the very minutes she had left talking to me so that I wouldn't waste any of them grieving her. So I didn't waste them. I keyed the public address. Not the panic version. There is no good panic version. There never was. There never will be. I used the one tool the night had not yet taken away from me. The simple fact that 70,000 people, trained by a lifetime of fire drills and 1,000 calm tannoy announcements, will move calmly and in good order if you only give them a calm reason and a clear path to walk along. I gave them a reason. I made it up on the spot, in the steadiest voice I owned. A gas leak, I told them, in the service areas below the south stand. A precautionary full evacuation. No danger whatsoever to spectators. Please make your way calmly to your nearest exit. Follow the directions of the stewards. There is plenty of time. There is no need at all to hurry. A lie. The truest feeling lie I have ever told in my whole life. And then I ran the currents the way I'd run them in my head, 10,000 times, opening the exits in sequence, and not all at once. Feeding the body of the crowd out through 18 doors in a managed, even unhurried flow. No surge, no pool, no pressure point anywhere. Talking the stewards through it on the radio section by section, keeping the streams balanced. Reading the body the way I had read it for 6 years. It worked, the way it works when you do it right, and the crowd doesn't yet know to be afraid. They filed out. Section by section, tier by tier, stand by stand, 70,000 people walking out into the cold, wet night air believing they'd been mildly inconvenienced by a gas leak at a midweek cup tie. Breathing air that Esposito had cleaned for them. Most of them never once knowing how close the clock had run to the end. Some of them would still go down later at home, on the last train, on a friend's sofa in front of the late. Highlights the ones who'd taken too big a dose before the air came clean. I knew that, standing right there with my thumb still warm on the button. There was nothing I could do about the ones already over the line. But the body of the crowd, the great living organism I had spent my entire career learning how to keep safe, moved out of the box the way a crowd is supposed to move, alive, on its own 2 feet. Out into the night, coordination came back on the dead channel at 1931, and the flat administrative voice was not flat anymore. There was something underneath it now, something tight and fast. Control. Our sensors indicate that your perimeter is opening. You are in breach. You are ordered to reseal the structure immediately. Assistance is 4 minutes out. Reseal the perimeter, control, now. I keyed back, for the first time since I'd muted them, and the last time I ever would. "There's no perimeter," I said. "There's just people. And they're already in the street. You're 4 minutes too late to seal anything at all. Whatever you came to do tonight to a box full of people, there's no box. So go home." I don't know who they were. I never found out. And I have made a kind of grim peace with never knowing. The way you make peace with a thing you understand, you will never be allowed to understand. By the time the last of the crowd was out of the gates and the proper emergency services finally arrived, the real ones, in real uniforms, with real confusion all over their faces, there was no unauthorized channel on the net anymore. No inbound assistance, no coordination. Nothing at all but a stadium emptied of the living and sealed below the surface with the dead. And a story that didn't fit any category that anyone in an office afterward wanted to write down into a report. They put it down, in the end, as the successful containment of a hazardous biological incident with no public fatalities recorded on site, which was true the same way Esposito's bandage was white, which is to say true only on the surface, and only from a distance, and only if you took great care not to look. The official count of the dead inside the building was 41. All of them staff, all of them in the service levels. They never once released the number who went down later, in the days that followed. Scattered out across the city, the slow-dose ones, the ones the cleared air hadn't quite reached in time. I have a number for it in my head, from the news in the weeks after. But I don't trust it, and I won't repeat it here. Because saying a number you don't trust is its own particular kind of lie. And I have told enough of those. Esposito kept the channel open for 19 minutes after she sat down against the plant room wall. I stayed on it the entire time, even while I was running the evacuation. Even while I was lying to 70,000 people in my steadiest voice, her voice in my one ear getting slower and softer and stranger. And then near the very end, frightened. The particular fear of a person who can feel their own mind beginning to come apart underneath them, and has nothing left in reach to hold on to. I talked to her the whole way. I told her the crowd was out. I told her she'd done it, that the air was clear, that the people were walking home in the cold, under the lights, alive, breathing, because of her and only her. I told her over and over, the same few true things, until I wasn't sure anymore that she could follow the words. And then I told her anyway, because she had done exactly the same thing for the steward she couldn't save. And I finally understood why. You keep talking so that they aren't alone. The words stop being information at all and become the only thing one human being can still give another across a sealed steel door. The channel went quiet at 1950. 3 minutes after the timestamp in the corner of camera 9 had read 1947 and shown me, through the medical bay window onto the inner concourse. The thing I described to you at the very beginning of all this, the medical lead crouching beside a man on a gurney. The man sitting up and taking her face in both his hands. Except that by 1950, I knew the truth of that frame. I knew that the crouching figure that had once been Esposito had made it past that window, down that left-hand wall, in through the plant room door, and had cleared the air before the corridor finally took her. I knew that the 70,000 singing above her in that frame were already filing out into the night, saved by the woman the camera was quietly showing me lose herself in the dark. I showed you that frame first, because it is the frame I see every single night when I close my eyes, still, all these months later. But it is not where the night began, and it is not what the night meant. It was only ever where the camera happened to be pointed. I sat in that control room in the blue-white glow until the real responders came and made me get up and leave it. I have never once gone back. I left the work a few weeks later, after 19 years, because I had built an entire life and an entire self upon the belief that every emergency has a category, and that the category is how you stay sane and keep people alive. And I had learned, in the space of a single gray Tuesday evening, that the very worst things in the world don't have one. That the flow chart move and the right move can be the exact opposite move. That I had sealed the doors with my own hand and concentrated the poison and pumped it warm into the lungs of the very people I was sworn to protect, and felt good about it for 20 whole minutes. And that the only thing that saved any of them at all in the end was a doctor who walked calmly into the dark to change the air, and a 30-year-old named Marco who hadn't yet learned to think in laminated cards. People ask me, when I tell a softened, shorter version of this to someone who needs to hear it, whether I think I made the right calls. The seal at 1814, sending Esposito down into the dark and not going myself. The gas leak lie I told 70,000 people, refusing to reseal when the voice on the dead channel ordered me to. I don't have an answer for them. I genuinely don't. And I have stopped pretending I'm anywhere close to one. I know that 70,000 people walked out of that building alive that night, on their own feet, under the floodlights, out into the rain. I know that some of them did not stay alive. I know that 41 people died down in the dark below the surface, while the crowd sang above them, oblivious, joyful, on their feet. I know that one of those 41 died alone in the lungs of the building so that all the rest of them could breathe. And I know that I watched every single part of it happen on the security monitors, in silence, in that cool blue light, while not one of the 70,000 ever once thought to look down. That's the part I can't put away, and I've stopped trying to. The watching. The whole of it played out on those small, grainy screens the worst night of my life, and the bravest thing I have ever seen a human being do. All of it unfolding in total silence on a wall of monitors. 4 levels below a crowd that never once stopped singing. They watched the match. We watched the outbreak. And the building breathed all of us in, and breathed most of us back out. And the ones it kept down in the dark, where the cameras still point at nothing because I checked, once, a year later, from a laptop on my own kitchen table, late at night, on a channel that should have been dead and somehow wasn't. And the gathering was still there, in the corridors, drifting, patient, gathered at the doors, waiting for a warmth that isn't ever coming back. I closed the laptop. I haven't opened that feed since, and I won't again. Some doors you seal, and then you make yourself, deliberately, day after day, into the kind of person who doesn't open them a second time, because you have learned exactly what it costs to look, and exactly what it costs to act. And you have learned that the air you are breathing in right at this very moment came up through somewhere, from some space you cannot see, and that you will never again, as long as you live, be able to stop yourself wondering where.